Good afternoon, everyone in this audience and at home watching. Welcome to an interactive discussion with Volt representatives of the people on trust in politics. Trust in politics. This is going to be an interactive conversation, which means that your thoughts, your opinions, and your questions will be an active contribution to this conversation. First, we will have 4 representatives of the people from 2 different countries who will briefly make a statement. And then your thoughts, your opinions, and questions are very much welcome for them. Let's start. We will start with an elder woman of the municipality of Frankfurt in Germany. Her name is, and please give her a very warm welcome, Eileen O'Sullivan. Please take a seat. Lovely to see you again from Germany.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Eileen. We also have an elder woman from the municipality of Maastricht in the Netherlands, Anita Bastiaans.
Thank you.
Also very much welcome here. We have the chair of the Volt delegation in the province of Overijssel, Marise Wulfs. And we have finally somebody quite well known to most of us, the chair of the Volt delegation in the Dutch parliament, Laurens Dassen. So, Laurens, perhaps you can take a microphone. You have prepared a short introduction on the topic of trust in politics, and then our 3 other guests will briefly respond to you. And after that, we will have the thoughts and questions and opinions of the audience.
Okay, perfect. I will keep it very short because I see we only have 40 minutes. But trust in politics, I think it's a debate that we are having across Europe and that is very urgent because the trust in politicians, in the government, especially in the Netherlands, but I'm also curious in Germany, is at the moment very low. Sociaal Cultureel Planbureau, CBS, this week again indicated that the trust of people in the politics is so low. And that's the main reason, I think, and that's also the reason that we founded Volt, and that Volt is active and needs to be present across Europe, is that the current parties are pushing the problems further and further ahead. We see it in different discussions, and also this week again, it was again on the television that the water quality within the Netherlands is a serious issue, and that in a few years, likely there will be no tap water coming out of the tap that we are able to drink. And currently also the droughts in the south of Europe are already providing shortages within water, and we know this for quite some time already, but the parties in government choose not to act. And even though we know it right now, still the biggest party in parliament, the VVD, tries to slow down on improving the water quality. And this is exactly the reason why I think that trust in politics is rightfully low, because we do not address the problems that we are facing fast enough, and we do not provide real solutions to these problems. So I think that is one of the main things that we need also with Volt to make hard choices on climate, on water, on agriculture, also on social inequality, to ensure that we provide solutions to the problems. But another thing that I would like to address, and I also would like to hear your opinion, is transparency within politics. We have been advocating for quite more transparency, also with regarding to a lobby register. 1.5 years ago we filed a motion. There was a majority within Parliament, and after 1.5 years, this week we had a debate, and the minister said, yeah, we're not going to do that. So this is really something that frustrates me, because I think that also within politics you need to be transparent on how decisions are being made, and also be inclusive on the people that are part of that also see how are laws being established. And the last part I would like to say, and then I'll really stop, is also including society within ID generation. We call it citizen empowerment within Volt, burgerfora. In 2 weeks, we will come with a manifest on this and present it in the Vondel Church in Amsterdam on a permanent burger forum to ensure that we get more active participation at the beginning of the process, get idea generation, and also make sure that the whole of society feels represented within the solution. And I think that also relates to the discussion that we had before on inclusivity. So those are 3 points.
For a politician, you speak very concisely, I must say. Thank you very much. 3 points. Trust is rightfully low, you said, because solutions are pushed ahead. There's a lack of transparency and an unwillingness to deal with the lack of transparency. And we need permanent citizen fora. Thank you very much, Laurens. Who would like to respond first?
I think in addition to what Laurens just said, I think new politics, leadership is needed, and we don't have a vision in Holland. We just address problems short term and not for the long term. And we push everything forward, and I think that's another problem. We don't have the time to push things forward. We're only pushing the things forward, and we frame it differently. We have an asylum problem, but actually it's a housing problem. So we push the things frequently forward, and I don't know what's like in Germany.
So we've had a very interesting time in the last 12 months in Frankfurt because we actually had a movement from our citizens, or a motion from the parliament, because we basically initiated a referendum to unelect the Lord Mayor due to corruption. So this is a hot topic in Frankfurt. And we just got a new Lord Mayor, so everything's fine now. But there's obviously such a lack of trust and transparency, as you said. And I think oftentimes something that I've found in the last year and a half when we were talking to citizens and looking at different, I think it's Bürgerbeteiligung in German, but the citizen participation tools that you do have, that you know that work, that we don't use them. So currently we are creating a framework to actually standardize the quality of what are the results, to have clear expectation management as to what can we ask our citizens, what can they expect to happen with their recommendations. But when things are recommended by citizens, and we've had forums like this, oftentimes there's not an explanation as to why the recommendations couldn't actually be put through Parliament. And I think with regards to like the transparency register, I wonder if the minister stood up and actually explained what the reason was for this not working, because I think often in politics we say, but we can't do this and it's for financial reasons and we don't have the resources, when actually we can really explain like the dynamics of why things are currently not going to work, why we can't implement specific projects. I often think we don't trust people enough for them to actually understand why a project might take longer, why we need more money or resources for a specific implementation. And I think people feel that. I think society feels not taken seriously. And I guess I was thinking about how, like, what picture I'd paint. And I think with regards to society and politics, I think it's a bit like an actual human relationship. Like, we want to be appreciated, we want to be heard. Doesn't mean that when our friend does something that we don't approve of, they're not our friend anymore. But if we understand why they acted the way they did, we can surely trust them a bit more because we trust their decision making. And I think it's the same in politics. And I don't think we explain enough. And I think we should. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Toch, de laatste vraag.
For Overijssel, the point that I recognize most is the fact that we don't really address problems. I've been quite freshly elected, actually, so I've just been through my first campaign ever. And preparing for it, I thought that I would thoroughly read all of the election programs, know all the details, and then have heated discussions about them. But actually, we all show up with our pretty hair and suits, and we just vomit our party lines, and that was it.
It took me a debate or three to realize that that was what's going on. So I asked people afterwards, was this useful to you? Do you have an idea of who to vote for now? And the ones that are interested in the topics, like farmers in the Netherlands, for example, they were like, you were not really saying anything, because I know about the rules, and actually I've been involved on a quite detailed level. You don't provide solutions for them. And I was like, yeah, you were right. But even as important, the viewers who are maybe not as interested in politics, who really need, well, from scratch, an idea of who to vote for. And they were like, well, that guy sounded nice, or that thing you said was funny. I know I'm funny, but that's not something that's going to help you when you're going to vote, right? So I think this has something to do as well with what Eileen just said about not taking our audience seriously, because they know quite well what's going on. And we're just saying the words, that sounds nice. We want a better world. We want great public transport. We want to take care of nature. We all know that. The question is how, and it's time to actually go start and do something. Now, to wrap up, in reaction to this story, some people said, well, that's only during campaigning. Once you take your seat, that's all going to be different. And then I'm like, well, if we're willingly acting different during campaign and during your governmental period, and we're all very much okay with that situation, I think that's your problem right there.
Thank you very much. And I would say let's take the opportunity to have that conversation with the 4 official representatives we have here on the stage, because the meaning of this panel discussion is not a one-way direction, but it is also very much about your input, your opinions on trust, confidence in politics. So let's hear your voice on that and take this opportunity. 2 more things. I very much like to ask the people who are standing at the sidelines to sit down or keep quiet, because we have an issue here with hearing. So please, you can hear much better in the middle part. The mics go to the questions in the middle part and not at the sideways, so that's a point of order. So to start this open discussion, I would very much like to ask you first, one moment please, sir. Yes, about your opinion on how you feel and how you think to improve or can be improved trust and confidence in politics. And you may ask your questions in Dutch and we will try to translate if necessary. So let's have a good conversation. Let's start.
Thank you. My name is Evert-Jan van Hasselt. To be honest, I'm a little bit shocked by what I hear from the audience. From the stage, because I have the feeling that what is stated there just now is part of the problem. The reason that there is this huge amount of distrust is the fact that there is a disconnect between politics and society, between government and society. And that finds its roots in the fact that governments, politics work for the people. And they come up with solutions, and those solutions might differ from the ideas that are in society. And governments are pushing those solutions. And as a result, governments end up in working against the society. So where we need to go to is to work with society. And for that, it's important to do a little step back on the political arena to allow this dialogue with society on the right solutions. And if I hear things like we need to stop pushing the difficult issues before us, partially you are right. But by focusing on that, there's a good chance that you will fire resistance in society And with that, the final solutions will take even longer. So I call upon, take a little bit step back and start working with people. And working with people is working with people in the action. That's the last point I want to make. We suffer from what I call decision-taking fetishism. We are so focused on taking decisions that we forget the action, and the real power is in the action. And a lot of issues solutions can be found in going into action. So that would my call be, take a little step back, engage with society, and then take the decision making from there. And Volt as a grassroots organization is the ideal organization to do so.
I think that's a very interesting statement, thank you. Because from my personal experience, it seems to be actually the other way around. I feel like that society is way ahead of us politicians. For example, when we talk about energy transition, in the debates that I've had and with my colleague elected officiant, the conversation goes like, yeah, this is really important, we need to start this now. And then someone else says, no, let's wait for a bit, it's not that important. Let's wait for investigations, whether it's harmful for our health. And that goes on for a while. While in society, the people that we talk to on the streets, they were like, we are building communities. We have solar panels, we have renewable energy in our neighborhood, and we're figuring out how to own that together, how to go about joint ownership, because you politicians haven't made all of the laws and the rules that we need for it. Well, people are actually already doing the things that we are so struggling so hard to come up with. So actually I feel like we're the ones that are going behind. We should step up and try to keep up with them.
Yeah. So, okay. Who likes to take this point? Step up and participate.
I don't see any other question. Oh, there is a question here at the front. Can we have a microphone here, please? I also saw some people nodding when you spoke, so I think you spoke for more than just yourself here. And meanwhile, can you please state your name?
Yeah, I was nodding too. My name is Djoeke Begeman. I appreciate the awareness of the lack of trust, because that is really dangerous, and that we need to solve that distance. I think blaming the politicians for it is not the whole story. There's also a problem with our education. Nowadays, children are hardly educated anymore in the importance of the civic state, why we do have a state, why we do have politicians. I've spoken recently with teachers, and they have such a problems competing with the screens in the class. Children don't know anything about it, so I would really appreciate it if Volt, for instance, part of the European campaign would campaign for a European program of civic state skills in the schools. That we educate children again in Europe and in citizen skills. The WER wrote a report about that and it disappeared. But that is part of the problem too.
Thank you very much. Any comment?
I fully agree, and I think it's also part of our European program already, that we work on burgerschap lessen, as well in the Netherlands as that we do across Europe. I think it's also in our MOP, because it's very important that, okay, we live in a democratic state, but what does it mean? How do the different institutions work? What is your role and responsibility also within there? How does it work, and how can you contribute to it? Because also society is very important of course, in a democratic structure. So I completely agree, also within education, this is very important. And we have this in our MOP, and so I'm sure it will be taken up towards the European elections.
If we could promote that.
Yeah, so it's in our European policy program, and it's up to us all to ensure that it's also part of the election program for the 2024 elections next year. Definitely.
There's a question here in front.
And to add to that, it was also in the Amsterdam Declaration in the 2019 program.
The microphone is here.
Thanks. My name is Anton. I'm from Utrecht. And Marisa, I really liked your comments about how the interaction is between politics and society. And I think my question is, like, trust is a two-way street, right? So we need society to trust politicians, but we also need politicians to trust society. And in that regard, for example, when we're organizing a citizens' assembly on the topic of climate, the question that I have is, should we confine the citizens' assembly to be within our own party lines? Like, for example, we say you're going to think about climate neutrality, but you need to think of solutions that will achieve climate neutrality before 2040, because that fits within our idea of society. But I think it's also good, it has value, if we're able to say we trust society to be more progressive, for example, than what politics can achieve, and we're able to completely open the discussion on when and how we're going to achieve climate neutrality. And I'm very interested to hear your views on this.
Interesting question, thank you. I think the idea of opening up the discussion sounds nice, because when you say, this is our Volt idea, and we just want you to figure out the details, it sounds a bit narrow, right? We want to trust them more and give them a more open question. I think that if we do that, we shouldn't open it up just one way. You cannot ask them to either achieve this result or be more progressive, because chances are the discussion will open up the other way. And you will hear people say, well, it's not that big of a deal, and we can take more time if we want. So I think that we are limited by, well, the reality of what's around us in this instance. So we have laws, we have made agreements within Europe, and those are the guidelines of what we should achieve. I think that's an acceptable standard of what we can all agree on, that's the goals we're aiming for, and we can ask everyone how. And indeed, if it were up to me, I'd say that question should be as open as possible. Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you. There's a microphone here in front.
All right, my question is, do you guys think that the lack of trust in politics is an inevitable consequence of democracy, in the sense that it's always going to be a compromise between ideals and pragmatism, and as long as you have to cooperate with other parties, it means that you have to abandon some plans and go for others, and as a consequence of abandoning those plans, people lose trust in politics, and the more you compromise from the ideals that you set in your election campaign, the more trust you lose. And also another thing, what did I want to say? I forgot. Well, that's already something.
Later on.
So I think that's actually something where I feel like we're growing into moving around real politics in Germany, at least, in lots of coalitions, where oftentimes we need a compromise, which is not going to be an absolute copy of what we said in our election program, because you need to compromise with, in our case in Frankfurt, 3 other parties. So we're a coalition of 4, which can be very difficult and interesting. But I think, again, the question goes back to explaining why the compromise turned out to be the end result and not what you wrote in your election program. I think we can trust citizens with understanding that compromises need to be made, because that's how democracy works, as long as we as parties actually also allow ourselves to go the extra mile and go into an explanation as to why this compromise had to be made and that it was a political decision, because I think everyone can understand that, and I think obviously there will be compromises that look better or worse for you. I think there needs to be a balance, obviously, but that is a kind of awareness thing for parties and coalitions. But I don't think anyone would be surprised. Sometimes I feel like politicians are seen as like supernatural people, but that is also sometimes because politicians pose as supernatural people, like they can do anything and anything can happen, and that's rubbish. That's just not what's going on. But I think if we can be real about that and we can actually say, like, there's only so much we can do, there's only so much time we have, there's only so much money that we have, and then also we need to negotiate and meet the others in the middle, I think everyone will understand that, and I think we can have a bit of a more authentic relationship with society, you know, if you want to, I guess, have two different parties if we're discussing society and politics, because I mean all of us are politicians, but we're also citizens. That's never going to go away from us, no matter which role we have.
Okay. Explaining the nature of compromise and why that came about and how. Thank you. I think there was a question here in the front.
Yeah, so I do also agree that politics and political parties have a lot of the blame for the situation of trust in politics in this country and others. And I personally think that Volt has a very important role there in being an example towards other parties, towards other politicians, in what we can do to gain more trust from people. So essentially my question to all of you is, what are each of you doing in each of your offices or planning on doing to set that good example and to show us what's possible?
What are you each individually doing? And your name was?
Hugo.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. What do? We set an example by being transparent, by being participative, to engage people, to when we make a decision, explain why we make the decision, but also not being just the old politics. We're working with the coalition parties, but also to engage the other parties. So I think that's the main reason why that's the main goal, being transparent and to engage other people, but also explain the hard decisions we sometimes have to make, why we make the decisions, and explain what's behind the decision.
Yeah, and I think we also provide new ideas for democratic improvements like the Citizen Assembly. And last year, of course, we wrote a big initiative on integrity, transparency, to ensure that also our public administration is improved and that also society is more involved within the decisions that are being made. And I strongly believe that transparency within that is really important. I think what we've seen last year within the European Parliament, and I'm also a bit worried towards next year's election with the Qatargate, does not help with trust in our European Parliament. And I think that you should have clear rules and regulation also how to deal with that. And of course, everyone was shouting that we need to do that within the European Parliament, and we also believe that we should do it in the Dutch Parliament as well.
Another person.
What I'm trying to do is a bit of a soft initiative. I'm trying to be as real as possible. So in my connection with society, which sounds weird to me because my connection with society is the same as all of you have, we're part of it. On an Instagram account, for example, just trying to show sort of behind the scenes of being an elected official, but also in my interaction with the other parties in the regional parliament. There's no difference between what I'm saying to them at the coffee machine or in the formal debate. And they'll sometimes say, well, it's different, it's a bit of teether. And every time I'm like, no, I'm going to say the exact same thing again at the microphone there. And it's going to take some time probably, and not going to give me headlines probably, but I'm hoping this has an effect in the long run.
Okay. So I've mentioned the framework for citizen participation. That means that we've just started a process where we have basically 24 individuals from the public administration, organized civic organizations. We have 6 people from politics and 6 randomly selected citizens who are going to now discuss within the next 6 months what are the rules and the playing ground for citizen participation in Frankfurt. And we've not done that before, and I really hope that that will open our government. And I think that's going to be a big part of transparency and letting people have a conversation with politics and helping us finding the right solutions. And then I think what would be really nice if all governments, and I'm trying to force this into Frankfurt, would actually have a project dashboard and to show what's going on, because a lot of people don't actually know what we're doing. I mean, we have heaps and heaps of offices and people are doing so many things, but no one really knows. And once citizens actually hear what's going on, oftentimes they say, oh, I didn't know that was happening, that's really cool. So we're trying to work on that. And then something for the public administration that I would like to open is that we start something called, like, some of you will know, fuck-up nights that startups do often. And I would like to establish that in our administration, because we fuck up so much, but everyone hides it. When actually, even, you know, everywhere where people work, fuck-ups happen. So I think we should talk about our mistakes more. So we'll see if public administration will go for it, but we're going to go for it. We're going to show all our fuck-ups, yeah.
Political fuck-up nights. Interesting idea. You heard it here first. Thank you. You had already responded, or?
I have
responded, but maybe to add to one thing, I think one of the main goals that we also have is to ensure that we improve laws and regulations as much as possible. Within the Netherlands, we have now the Spreidingswet that is coming to the parliament, and we've seen that it's because it's a compromise. You see that there's a lot of problems coming up with the execution, and we also say that then the law and regulation should not be implemented if it's not improved, because it will ensure that going forward we get more and more troubles with it, and ensure that instead of improving the situation, making things worse. And then I think a compromise is not the right solution. Then I say, okay, we need to ensure that with all the laws and regulations, all the problems we had already with the execution, we need to ensure that it's improved. And I think it's also our job to ensure that we control the government, but also make amendments and motions to improve the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have the next question or opinion or adding there.
Yeah, so actually my question was a bit about what Laurens just said, because I have mixed feelings about the explaining and the showing yourself as a human who can make mistakes, because I agree that explaining why you do things is important, and I think it can certainly help to improve trust in the politician as a person. But I'm not so sure that it will actually help improving trust in the political system, because that still needs to come up with solutions. So how do you feel about that?
Is that a clear question?
I think it's a bit along the line what I just mentioned. That's also our role, to ensure that we improve laws and regulations, that they also fit the problems that people face. But I also see right now within the Netherlands that the politicians that are in power right now sometimes push problems a bit ahead, making problems into crisis, because they do not really address the problem, they do not take the pain. That sometimes sometimes if you're a leader, you also need to make a choice that also might not be a popular choice, and that also the people of the achterban, sorry, I don't know the English word, your voter base, is not very happy about. But in the long run, it will improve society as a whole. So I think it also requires leadership, and that's something that I'm missing at the moment. And therefore, I think there's also a big role of Volt to ensure that we have our solutions. They sometimes are going to hurt, but even though we know that, and even though it might lose some voters for that, then we still need to make those decisions, because in the long run, society will profit from it. And that's something that I miss currently within our political leadership within the Netherlands. And therefore, I also think it's time for a new generation that is not scared to make those decisions.
No? Okay, then we go to the next question.
Yeah, thank you. My question goes on, well, goes a bit deeper on that. We live in a society where politics is one-liners, where media is everything, polarization is everywhere, and I wonder what your visions are on how Volt, what the balance is between making a name for yourself and creating a voice and a sound, and not going on this circus of one-liners and media frenzies. So what your vision is on that?
I can just say I'm struggling so much with this in Frankfurt, because oftentimes when we throw things into the discourse in committees, for example, when we report on what we've been doing, oftentimes that would not be put into the press. And with things like creating a framework for citizen participation, to me, that is changing the political system of an entire city. I think that's massive. But no one wrote about it. We had a press conference and no one came by. So sort of what we're trying to, oh, actually one journalist came by, who always comes by to all our press conferences because he's really nice. Yeah, shout out to that guy. But like, it's kind of hard because you need to, what I've found is really interesting is that having good connections with journalists actually helps you get into the press. And me personally, I mean, having to build that network has been really a roller coaster. I've had to learn how to do that because that's not something I've been taught within Volt. Like, we've been taught a lot of things, you know, and being empowered, but that's something new. And so I think what's really great about social media is that to a degree it is a bit of a democratization of how information can be spread. And so we've been going hard on social media and telling people what we're doing and taking them with us to projects and events and things. And what you said, like trying to show the back rooms of what's going on in the government. And just hoping that someday journalists will find that interesting too. And until then, just having lots of coffee with them.
Okay, so please don't take my next question personally, but transparent to whom and engaging with whom? So, like, the fact that the political participation is so low right now means that we're not being transparent and we're not being engaging. And first of all, with like transparency, I mean, just in the government alone, if you want to need something from the government or need to apply for something, yeah, the forms you need to work on are already crazy. And just sitting in this Congress, like, or not Congress, but you know what I mean, shitty English. Anyway, just sitting in this gathering today, you know, it's already like I heard a bunch of words that even for me, and I'm studying in university already. Like, what am I even hearing here? And just in general, language in political discourse and political debate, also, it's just so ingrained that it's very difficult to change. And for engagement, I mean, a lot of people simply don't have the means to engage right now with politics, in the sense that just being in an entire evening, like in some political parties gathering, or an entire day, spending an entire day when you have to provide for your family, when you have to care for children, or when you have to, and you don't have a lot of money. That's just a barrier to engagement in general. And in that sense, like, what are Volt's short-term and long-term plans in detail on actually tackling the barriers between, like, the people and transparency and engagement as concepts?
Well, you can hear by the silence, this is a very difficult question for us. Even if it was only 3 seconds, still, we were looking at each other like, yeah, good point. Because this is a very difficult thing, and I think there's 1,000 problems in what you just mentioned, and there could also be 1,000 solutions, and we just have to pick and choose the one that we're able to do now. For me, in terms of language, I think that connects really to what we started with, the fact that we don't really address problems. The best way to not address problems is just to say a lot of multi-syllable words and make very long sentences that go nowhere. And I think many politicians do that. So we could just turn around the action and the consequence by being real, being honest, and being pragmatic. I'm sure that we will stop using words that nobody knows or making sentences that nobody can follow, because that goes automatically if you're just being real and trying to practically resolve something. But that's only a very small part, of course, of all of the difficulties that you mentioned. There's many more things to that, and I'm afraid we can't list them all. At least I can't.
I think what I've found is that the political system, at least on the local level in Frankfurt, is very uninclusive. So plenary starts on Thursdays at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it tends to go till midnight or 1. I mean, I'm sorry, but which nurse, for example, which mother or father who's raising kids by themselves can actually spend that much time once a month and then go to committees? Like, it's insane how many people we're excluding just for the fact that we need people to be present, because you can't do a hybrid meeting or whatever, which is mad to me. So I think we need to change the way the political system works. I think we need to open our governments and like give our democracy a bit of an update, I like to say, because it's not just election ballots that we can rely on. Like, we need to go into a discourse with people, educate them while we're at it. Like, we're talking about how much more progressive society is. If you look to Ireland, they changed their constitution on abortion rights because of citizen assemblies that were done really well. It takes time, it takes discourse, it takes experts that will break things down for everyone to understand. Because I personally, I have to say, like, I wish I'd actually be doing what you said, because I feel myself drifting away from the normal citizens because I'm in a political bubble. So I feel like I'm also lacking the dictionary at this point to really speak to people and 100% make them understand what I'm trying to say. So I think we need to open the structures, change them, have more discourse, and do something with the results of that in order to make people feel like they're actually being heard.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. On Buitenhof, there was this Harvard professor called Michael Sandel, and I'm reading his latest book. It's called The Tyranny of Meritocracy. And if you come to read that, he explains from Luther back on how first Christianity, to work hard, was for the good of your religion, and now it turned on to be for good of your new house or new car. So you work hard, and if you have this system of meritocracy, you have some people, the winners, and you have the losers. If you are not successful, it's up to you, it's your own fault. And that is very humiliating, and that turns people off. And give the distrust, and also we Volters are generally winners, and most politicians are winners, but not all winners are not all people are winners, and it's not just a Dutch problem, it's all over. So I think it's because in our system, this liberalism or neoliberalism creates this effect that you have winners who say, it's my achievement, and you have the losers who are thinking, oh, I did wrong. And that's very humiliating. What's your vision on that?
I fully agree. I mean, I think everyone, or most people here, have a lot of luck in which part of society they are present right now. And I think a lot of people didn't have the same chances from the start. It really matters where you were born. In which part of society? Where were your parents able to stimulate you in school? To which schools did you go? Last year we tabled a resolution to ensure that we have free school lunches. And 3 weeks ago, I went to a school where they implemented this. The teachers told me that they, once they implemented it, they saw that the children really aankwamen, zeg maar. Gained weight. I mean, knowing that, and knowing that there are so many children within the Netherlands as well that have to go to school with an empty stomach, when they are not able to really learn there. I mean, there you already see that there is a big discrepancy in what we think we are as society and where we actually are currently. And once we left the school, one of the children asked us, because the motion only has money till the end of the year, the child, he stood up and he asked, what are we going to do when we do not get our lunches anymore? And I think we always should remember that we should take care of each other within society to ensure that there are equal opportunities, which are currently not the case. And this is just an example, but there are many more, I think.
Thank you very much. We have time for one last question. Please.
Hi, my name is Sjoerd Nijhuis. I would like you to give me some examples of the positive attitude that we would like to see everywhere when we are Volters. And I suppose you have at least some examples in your own practice, and we love good practice, in which you show that from this positive attitude you can easily get along with your colleague representatives, even if they are from other parties, but to get things done. And well, please give me some examples.
Well, actually, quite recently, the formation in Overijssel started. So there was a conversation between the parties that were going to form the government. And very nicely, we were asked as a regional parliament to give input for those conversations on an individual basis. So all of us got a call separately. And right before I wanted to give my response to that, I thought, why couldn't we all give a joint response? Because otherwise, this guy will receive 11 different requests, and even if he wants to fulfill all of them, it's going to be extremely difficult. So I called up every one of our colleagues, all the party leads, and asked them, what is it that you want? And then with every phone call, I tried to find like the common base for everyone, changed a little bit with every next phone call, but after a full, well, day and a half of phone calls, we had a common base, something that everyone could agree on. So I handed that in as a joint response, gave everyone the chance to amend if they wanted to. And that got a lot of positive reactions, actually, that all of us opposition parties, left to right, at least had something. It was very small, but it doesn't matter. It's the idea of doing something together that I think really gave everyone a Volt vibe.
This is where we're about to finish this conversation. We've heard you say a lot of things. We've heard you talk about leadership. We've heard you talk about citizen assemblies. We've heard you talk about needing to explain not implementing decisions or explaining how you've reached compromises. We've heard people speak about education and civic skills, about trust being mutual and not just going one way, of needing leadership, but also society perhaps being advanced of the politicians. We've heard you talk about needing to take the audience seriously and feeling heard and understood. So one final question to you all, perhaps if you can answer in one sentence, roughly. What of this entire conversation resonates most for you? What is the most interesting thing that you have heard of this conversation in one sentence?
Fuck up night.
Fuck up night.
Try to feel an open attitude and engage people.
An open attitude and engage people. Thank you.
I think the question around how do we include more people, that's really something that always sticks with me, I have to say.
How to include more people.
I think also what was mentioned in the beginning, it's also action. Start, execute. Make sure that you don't talk too much, and also make sure that you make the wishes of the people come true.
Make the wishes of the people come true. Dear audience, thank you for your questions. Dear representatives of the people, thank you very much.